On a chilly October evening in Philadelphia, Sylvester Stallone sat in his usual corner booth at Rocky's, his upscale Italian restaurant. The warm glow of vintage-style pendant lights illuminated the burgundy leather seats where he had spent countless evenings overseeing his establishment. Tonight, he was reviewing the evening's special menu while enjoying a glass of Montepulciano, making notes about Chef Antonio's new veal saltimbocca recipe. The restaurant hummed with the familiar sounds he had grown to love: the clink of fine china, the murmur of satisfied diners, and the rhythmic chopping from the kitchen. Rocky's had become more than just another celebrity restaurant. It was his pride and joy, a piece of Philadelphia he had built from scratch, just like his career. The calm of the evening shattered when voices erupted from the kitchen. Marco, his head waiter, pushed through the swinging doors with an unusually concerned expression. "Mr. Stallone, we have a situation in the back." In the kitchen, a thin teenage girl had slipped through the delivery entrance. She stood trembling near the industrial dishwasher, her dark hair unwashed and her oversized jacket worn at the seams. The kitchen staff had stopped their work, unsure how to handle the interruption. The girl, who they would later know as Sarah Mitchell, hadn't eaten in 2 days. Her chapped lips quivered as she spoke to Luis, the line cook, asking if there were any leftover food she could have. Stallone observed the scene from the doorway. The girl couldn't have been more than 16, though hardship had aged her face beyond her years. Her posture reminded him of a cornered animal, ready to flee at the slightest threat. The security guard moved forward, but Stallone raised his hand, stopping him. "Hey, kid, come here," he said, his voice carrying the same gentle gravity that had delivered countless memorable lines on screen. The girl spun around, her eyes widening with recognition. She took a step backward, bumping into the steel prep table. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I'll leave. I didn't mean to cause trouble." Her voice cracked with a mix of fear and embarrassment. Stallone stepped fully into the kitchen, deliberately keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "Nobody's in trouble here," he said, pulling out one of the steel chairs from the staff break table. "Sit down. When's the last time you had a proper meal?" Sarah hesitated, her eyes darting between Stallone and the door. Finally, hunger won over fear, and she slowly sank into the offered chair. The kitchen staff watched in silence as Stallone himself walked to the line, grabbed a clean plate, and began building a plate of fresh pasta marinara. He added extra meatballs and a generous portion of garlic bread, remembering his own days of empty pockets and hollow stomachs. As he set the plate in front of her, Sarah's eyes welled with tears. "I can't pay for this," she whispered. "Tonight, you're my guest," Stallone replied, taking a seat across from her. "Eat first, then we'll talk." While she ate, carefully at first, then with increasing urgency, Stallone gently drew out her story. She told him about her parents' death in a car accident 2 years ago, about being sent to live with an aunt who cared more about vodka than her niece, about trying to keep up with school while searching for ways to survive. Each detail resonated with Stallone, reminding him of his own struggles before Rocky, of sleeping in bus terminals and taking any job he could find. The kitchen gradually returned to its routine around them, though the staff kept stealing glances at the unusual scene. By the time Sarah finished eating, Stallone had made a decision that would change both their lives, though neither of them knew it yet. The following day, Stallone arrived at Rocky's hours before the dinner service. He sat in his office, a modest room decorated with a few choice movie posters and family photos, turning over the events of the previous night in his mind. Sleep had been elusive, his thoughts consumed by Sarah's story and the hollow look in her eyes that reminded him so much of his younger self. He'd made some calls that morning. First to his lawyer about the legalities of employing a minor, then to his old friend who ran a local youth shelter. The shelter worker had explained the grim statistics of teenage homelessness in Philadelphia, numbers that made his stomach turn. By noon, he had the beginnings of a plan. Marco, the head waiter, knocked on his office door around 2 o'clock. "She's back, Mr. Stallone. At the kitchen door, just like yesterday." Stallone found Sarah in almost the same spot as the night before, but this time she stood straighter, though her eyes still carried that wary look of someone used to disappointment. She wore the same oversized jacket, but had clearly tried to clean up. Her hair was combed, face washed. "I wanted to say thank you," she said quickly, before anyone could speak. "For last night. I should go." "You eaten today?" Stallone asked, interrupting her retreat. She shook her head, a slight flush coloring her cheeks. "Good, because I need your opinion on something." He gestured for her to follow him into the dining room. The staff was setting up for dinner service, laying crisp white tablecloths and polishing silverware. He led her to his usual corner booth, where 2 place settings waited. "Chef's testing a new chicken piccata recipe," he explained as they sat down. "I need a second opinion." Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why?" "Because sometimes people tell me what they think I want to hear." He caught her gaze and held it. "And something tells me you're not that type." As they ate, Stallone carefully laid out his proposal. A job, starting with dishes and basic prep work, learning the restaurant business from the ground up. He'd arrange proper work papers, make sure everything was legal. The catch? She had to go back to school. "I can't," she said immediately. "I need money. I can't waste time on—" "Education is never a waste," Stallone interrupted, his voice firm but kind. "You know my story? Everyone knows your story. Rocky, the movie you wrote yourself, the whole thing. Yeah, but do you know what happened before that?" He leaned back, his expression distant. "I was broke. So broke I had to sell my dog Butkus. That killed me. I loved that dog." He paused, letting that sink in. "But you know what I didn't sell? My dreams. My belief that I could be more." Sarah pushed the remaining food around her plate. "Dreams don't pay rent." "No, but this job will." He pulled out a folder with papers inside, employment forms, school registration documents, and information about youth support services. "Full-time during summer and school breaks, part-time during school year, plus tips from prep work. We'll work around your class schedule." Sarah stared at the folder but didn't take it. "Why are you doing this?" "Because 30 years ago, someone took a chance on me. Changed my whole life." He slid the folder closer to her. "Maybe it's time I returned the favor." "What if I'm not good at it?" The question came out barely above a whisper. Stallone smiled, remembering his own doubts from years ago. "That's why we start with dishes. Pretty hard to mess those up." His expression grew serious. "Look, I'm not offering charity here. This is a real job. You'll work hard. You'll study hard. Some days you'll probably hate it. But if you stick with it—" He gestured around the restaurant. "There's a future here. Your future. If you want it." The silence stretched between them as Sarah looked around the restaurant, then down at the folder, then finally back at Stallone. He could almost see the battle playing out behind her eyes. Hope wrestling with experience, opportunity fighting against fear. Finally, She reached for the folder with trembling fingers. "When do I start?" "Right now," Stallone said, standing up. "First lesson. How to tie an apron properly. Can't have it falling off while you're working." As he showed her the correct way to double knot the apron strings, Stallone caught Marco's eye across the room. The head waiter gave a subtle nod. He'd already briefed the staff, and they were ready to help. It wouldn't be easy, but then again, nothing worth doing ever was. The transition wasn't smooth at first. Sarah broke 3 plates her first week, accidentally loaded the dishwasher with regular soap instead of commercial detergent, and nearly quit twice when the pressure of balancing school and work became overwhelming. But Stallone kept his word, visiting Rocky's daily between filming commitments, usually arriving during the quiet afternoon hours when Sarah was just starting her shift. "The thing about success," he told her one day, while showing her how to properly polish wine glasses, "is that it looks a lot like failure while you're in the middle of it." He demonstrated the circular motion with the polishing cloth. "You just keep going, keep learning, keep trying to do better than yesterday." The restaurant staff, following Stallone's lead, became Sarah's unexpected support system. Luis, the line cook, started teaching her knife skills during slow periods. "You want to curl your fingers under, like this?" He'd demonstrate, showing her how to dice onions without risking her fingertips. The prep cooks helped her with Spanish vocabulary while they worked, and she helped them practice their English. When popular entertainment reporter Andrea Mitchell caught wind of the story through the local restaurant grapevine, she immediately reached out for an exclusive. Stallone's response was characteristic. "This isn't about publicity. It's about doing the right thing." His refusal to exploit Sarah's situation for press only strengthened the staff's respect for him. One evening, after Sarah had aced a particularly difficult history test, Stallone found her in the kitchen studying recipe cards instead of her textbooks. "School comes first," he reminded her. "I know," she replied, not looking up. "But I want to learn this too. I want to be good at it. Really good." Stallone smiled, recognizing the same determination he'd once felt. "Then we'll make sure you are. But first, show me that history test." 6 months had transformed more than just Sarah's circumstances. The girl who once trembled by the kitchen door now moved through Rocky's with confidence, her black uniform pressed, her hair neatly tied back, and her smile genuine. The hollow look in her eyes had been replaced by a spark of determination that Stallone recognized all too well. Her transformation wasn't just external. Her latest report card showed straight B's with an A in culinary arts class. She had moved out of her aunt's chaotic apartment into a supervised youth housing program Stallone had connected her with. The program provided not just a stable living environment, but also counseling and life skills training. Her room, though small, was the first space she could truly call her own since her parents' death. One busy Saturday evening, disaster struck in the kitchen. 2 servers called in sick, and a large party of food critics had arrived unannounced. Sarah, now familiar with basic food prep, stepped up without being asked. She helped plate appetizers, ran food to tables, and kept the dish station running smoothly. At the end of the night, Chef Antonio pulled Stallone aside. "The kid's got it," he said simply. "That thing you can't teach. She's got it." The following week, Sarah's school counselor, Mrs. Rodriguez, requested a meeting with Stallone. He arrived expecting problems, but instead found the counselor beaming. "Sarah's written her college application essay about you," she told him. "About Rockies, about second chances." Stallone hadn't planned to read the essay, wanting to respect Sarah's privacy, but she insisted. The words brought him back to his own struggles, his own dreams. "Sometimes life doesn't give you what you deserve," she had written. "Sometimes it gives you what you need, a chance to prove yourself, and someone who believes in you enough to give you that chance." It was around this time that Andrea Mitchell's producer reached out again. This time, Sarah herself asked Stallone to reconsider the interview request. "Maybe it could help other kids like me," she suggested, "or other people who could help them." The interview took place during the morning show's prime slot. Sarah sat beside Stallone, no longer the scared teenager who had slipped through the kitchen door, but a young woman with plans for her future. Andrea Mitchell, known for her hard-hitting interviews, found herself moved by their story. "What made you decide to help her?" she asked Stallone. "You know, in Rocky, there's this line about how life isn't about how hard you can hit, but about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward," he responded. "When I saw Sarah that night, I saw someone who'd been hit hard by life but was still fighting, still moving forward. Sometimes people just need someone in their corner." Sarah nodded, adding, "He taught me that your past doesn't have to define your future, that it's never too late to start over." It was then that Stallone made his surprise announcement. He was establishing the Rocky's Second Chance Scholarship Program for at-risk youth interested in culinary arts or restaurant management. Sarah would be its first recipient, with a full ride to culinary school after graduation. But the real surprise came after the cameras stopped rolling. In the green room, Sarah handed Stallone an envelope. Inside was her first paycheck from Rocky's that she hadn't immediately spent on necessities. "I want to donate it to the scholarship program," she said, "to help the next person." Stallone looked at the check, then back at Sarah, seeing in her the culmination of not just these past 6 months, but of a lifetime of believing in the power of second chances. The girl who had once begged for leftovers was now giving back, completing a circle that had begun on that cold October night. That evening at Rocky's, Sarah worked her usual shift, but something had changed. As she moved through the kitchen, teaching a new dishwasher how to properly load the machine, Stallone watched from the doorway. She caught his eye and smiled, not the timid smile of someone seeking approval, but the confident smile of someone who had found their place in the world. "You know what, kid?" he said as she passed by. "Adrian would have loved you." Sarah's eyes brightened at the reference. "Yeah? Yeah," he nodded. She had the same kind of strength, the quiet kind, the kind that changes lives. As the kitchen bustled around them, Stallone realized that sometimes the biggest victories don't come with fanfare and championship belts. Sometimes they come in smaller moments, in restored hope, in renewed faith, in the simple act of one person believing in another. The story of the girl who snuck into Rocky's kitchen looking for food became a local legend, whispered among the staff and regular customers. But for Stallone and Sarah, it wasn't about the legend. It was about the truth at its core, that sometimes all it takes to change a life is one person willing to open a door, literally and figuratively, and say, "Come in. Let's see what you can do."